Hi everybody, welcome to this Java tutorial. Today we're going to look at how to use Java's Swing library to create a GUI-based tic-tac-toe game. Now as you can see, my game is based in some kind of frame, and in the frame there are 9 buttons in a 3x3 grid layout. And when I click the buttons, something happens. Okay? Now this looks like it might involve an incredible amount of coding, because I have to code the design of the frame, I have to code the design of the buttons, and what happens when I click a button. That does sound very complicated. But what we're going to be doing is using Java's Swing library. So when we construct a new game frame, a frame appears, and inside that frame there are 9 buttons. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to base my game frame on something called a JFrame. A JFrame is a class of code which already exists. It has lots of functions that I can use, so that will save me time when I'm coding my own game frame. So I'm going to use this as a starting point, this JFrame, and I'm going to redesign it for my tic-tac-toe game. Also, in my game, I'm just going to be using J buttons. I'm not going to redesign those J buttons, I'm just going to use them. They are part of Java's Swing library. They already come with a lot of useful code which I can use. Perfect. This is going to save me a lot of time as I design my tic-tac-toe game. So just to recap, I'm going to use code available in the JFrame class to design my own unique frame. The JFrame code has already been coded and tested. Wow! It should be reliable, and it will save me time and possibly reduce errors in my own code. I'm going to use J buttons. These have already been coded and tested, so using them will save me time and possibly reduce errors in my code. I'm also going to have to figure out how to use an action listener so that when I click a button, something happens. Now, I'm not going to design my own action listener. I'm going to use an action listener which has already been coded for me. I'm just going to add little bits here and there for my unique tic-tac-toe game. Okay? So this is a background of how we're going to get started. In today's video, we'll look at how to create the visual tic-tac-toe GUI. And in subsequent tutorials, we'll look at the game logic. All right, let's get started. I'm going to go into my IDE. I've already set up a project area, and as you've just seen, I want to be able to do something like this. Now, this game frame idea is just my idea. I'm going to be designing this in today's tutorial. You can call this whatever you want. Tic-tac-toe game. It doesn't matter. You can call it whatever you want. I've decided to call it game frame. Now this is going to be a new class. So I'm going to go into my project area and create a new class called game frame. Now my game frame class is going to be using code which already exists in the JFrame class. I'm going to be using a Java Swing class called JFrame. And that red line means I need to import it into my project. There it is. From this Java Swing library, we're importing JFrame class. So I'm going to use this as like a base, and I'm going to redesign it so I can make my own game frame. Now, my game frame, my tic-tac-toe game, is going to have properties, and it's going to have functions which process the properties. When we're designing a new class, programmers don't usually use the word function. They use the word method. I don't know why, but that's the world of programming for you, okay? So we'll look at some methods in this design as we go through this tutorial series. Now then, the properties. I need an array of buttons. Do you remember? This 3x3 grid of buttons is just an array of J buttons. I'm going to use J buttons. So let's declare a J button array, and I'm just going to call it buttons. I think we need to import that. Yes, it's from the JFrame class. Lots of code available to us to mess around with J buttons. Another property of my game will be the current player. And of course this will be either an X or a 0. Okay, so those are the properties of my game. Now we need to think about methods which process these properties. The first method that I need to code is my game frame method. This method, I know it's a method because there are some round brackets there. This method is called when we first construct a game frame object. Okay, and it kind of gets things started. It's called the constructor method. And as you can see, it has the same name as the class. So this is the game frame class's constructor method. Now what we want to do first is initialize our buttons array to be a new J button array of 9 buttons. And we also need to set our current player to be either O or X. I'm going to choose X. Now do you remember, we are borrowing code from the JFrame class to make our own frame. Okay, so this function, this class, already comes with useful code that we can use. So this frame, the frame that I'm designing right now, I'm going to set the title of the frame to be Tic Tac Toe. I'm also going to do something a bit strange. I'm going to set the default close operation to be JFrame dot exit on close. All this line of code does is activates this red close button. If you don't have that line of code, you can't close your frame. Okay, that sounds a bit weird, but it's true. I'm also going to set the layout of this frame to be a new grid layout, which is a 3x3 grid. And I think I need to import that. Okay, so I'm setting up my game frame, I'm initializing the buttons, setting the current player, give it a title, activate the close button, set up the layout. I now need to assign J buttons to each element of my buttons array. I haven't done that yet. So let's use a for loop. And all we're going to say is every element in my buttons array is going to be a new J button. What we're also going to do is add an action listener to the button so that we can click it and make things happen. This is called adding an action listener. In order to add an action listener, we need to implement another class, the action listener class. Now, when we implement a class, what we're doing is kind of creating a contract between my class and the class that we're implementing. And it's forcing us to design some methods. Okay, it's kind of a reminder that if we want to use this, we need to design some methods. So we need to add unimplemented methods, which we're going to code later. There it is, the action performed method. We will be coding this later. Okay, so now that we've kind of connected to the action listener class in my class, the game frame class, I'm communicating with this now. I can add an action listener to each of my buttons. Add an action listener to this button, right? This is the button that I want to add the action listener to, so I just need to be specific. This means the button that I'm currently processing. Now that in my for loop, now that we've created a button, let's add the button to the frame. So this frame, we're going to add button's eye. We've added the button to the frame. So I think that's all that for loop needs to do. Now let's just set the size of the frame. Let's call it a 300 by 300. You can mess around with those numbers. We also want to center the frame in the middle of the screen, so there's a useful function to do that in the JFrame class. Set location relative to null. That's going to center the frame. And we need to make it visible. Now then, I think we've just set up the visual aspect of our game frame. Let's make sure that we're calling it. Yes, we are. We're constructing a new game frame object. We're going to call the constructor method. And the constructor method is going to do all of this for us. Let's see if it works. Yes, it works. Now when I click a button, nothing happens yet because I haven't coded the action performed method, which I have to. I have to code this because I've made an agreement with the action listener class that I'm going to do it. That's what this is really suggesting. Okay, so I need to code this, and that's coming up in the next tutorial.